afternoon. It's great to have you here. It's great to see so many faces, so many people from our network. I would like to warmly welcome you to the Koepel. I'm Jacqueline Lamp, I'm the CEO of Rnw Media, and I'm really happy to be able to welcome you to this innovative hub to digital creative media, to digital media training institutes. And we are in the Koepel, as you can see, a prison built in 1901 by the architect Mr. Metselaar, and for the English speaking that's Mr. Mason, so quite a good name for an architect, I would say. This prison has been in practice until 2016, and then it was acquired by the Panopticon Foundation, who turned it into this innovative hub. And there are two other prisons in the same form in the Netherlands, one in Arnhem and one in Breda, and they're both built by the father of this Mr. Mason, Mr. Mason Senior, I would say. So I'm really happy to have you here. And it's also important to realize that a prison is built to silence people who hold governments accountable, who stand up for their rights, who fight against injustice. So every day when we come into the office, we remind ourselves of the relevance of our work. And I wanted to just mention this because you will hear about our work and more importantly about the work of the young changemakers, and it will probably give you a context to the countries they work in. So our work started 75 years ago with Radio Netherlands Worldwide. And always important to realize, because Radio Netherlands Worldwide was basically focusing on human rights. And in the 70s, if I can mention one of the highlights, in the 70s they played a very important role in the revolutions in Latin America. And when you meet the older activists from Latin America, they probably know Radio Netherlands Worldwide, and they probably also know the digital media training programs of RNTC, the Radio Netherlands Worldwide training center from that time. So really important to acknowledge, because this innovative media DNA and the focus on human rights brought us where we are today. And today we are an international digital media organization, co-creating with the changemakers you will meet later today, in order to unleash the potential of young people and give them the tools and the voice to, or allow them to take their voice, because they all have a voice, allow them to take their voice and bring about change in their societies. What do? They claim their rights, they assume a place in society, and they drive social change. And we define social change by changing behavior, changing attitudes, and influencing social norms, laws and practices in the countries they work. And what we see today is that the rights of young people are increasingly under threat in a growing number of countries. The right to express themselves in all their diversity, the right to access reliable, impartial, credible information, the right to be online, the right to the digital space, increasingly under threat, and that makes it really important to work on these rights, because they're essential in the digital realm of today. This hub of digital incubators, this hub with the Haarlem campus with creative media and digital transformation management supports us in our inclusive, curious, fresh, innovative approach. In our approach to contribute to the SDGs, which are relevant to young people. And it also helps us to adapt ourselves to the needs in a growing digital space, to the needs of engaging with large communities of young people in the digital space, and use all the data we get online and in our work and turn them into insights in young people, in what young people need, in what they see as priorities, and in what they see as solutions. And work with them, co-create with them the solutions they see. So we do that in a synergetic way, I would say. We co-create, we collaborate with the young changemakers in order for them to create what they need. And I don't want to talk too long because I think the stories Spajon, Lucy and Sandy will tell you are far more illustrative, is that the word, for their work and the added value we bring. And that's what I wanted to mention. Our expertise is in digital media. It is in engaging with very large groups of young people online. It is in moderating the debate on safe topics and sensitive issues in a safe space. It is about, and I mentioned that before, using all the digital data we have and turning that into insights in what young people need, what they see as priorities, and what they see as solutions, and how they see these solutions to come alive. So together with you, we would like to work on accelerating these ambitious goals of young change makers in order to really scale the impact needed for young people. And if you look at what we've been doing in the past couple of years, with a certain budget, you could reach in a traditional way 100,000 young people per year, and we did it in the digital way with 15 to 20 million people. And it is about using the opportunities digital space brings us, managing the risks at the same time, but really focusing on the opportunities. So this experience and these figures made us quite courageous, quite brave. So we set ourselves a goal and we need you to achieve that goal. So what we would like is by 2030 that 1 billion young people is able to make informed decisions, advance their rights and affect their societies in an impactful way. But we can't do that on our own. So today it is about tomorrow's opportunities. It's about our collaboration. And I'm really happy to see you here and to have you here to celebrate 75 years of history, 75 years of innovative media DNA, but also to celebrate what we can do together in the near future. And in this digital space, we together will use these opportunities to address all the challenges we see today. And these challenges are in shrinking civic space, in decreasing freedom of speech, in decreasing safe spaces for change makers, for media makers, Well, and I can mention many more. It is also the challenging climate change. So together we should really look at how can we bring online and offline together to make sure that we accelerate the impact and contribute in a positive way to the SDGs, in a positive and also ambitious way to the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals. So today, I'm honored because Payal, you are here, Payal Arora. Payal Arora is a full professor and chair in technology, values and global media cultures at the Erasmus School of Philosophy at the Erasmus University. Payal is also the author of The Next Billion Users, Digital Life Beyond the West. And Payal will take us through the realities of working in the digital space. And I think, Payal, I'm sure I've been following you on LinkedIn, reading your articles, and I'm sure you will be able to create the context for the audience to listen very carefully to our change makers. So after Payal, Ruba Mimi will take the lead. Ruba is a dear former colleague, is a media professional since a long time, and is a trainer of our RNTC digital media training program. And Ruba will manage the panel discussions, and the panel discussions will be with Spajon Ngabo from Yaga Burundi, with Lucy, and sorry Lucy, Doumanian. No, sorry, I find it stupid. But from SMEX in Lebanon, and Sandy Abdel Messi from Love Matters Arabic, operating from Egypt. So what I would like to say is please enjoy listening to these brave people. I'm sure you will be inspired. Enjoy listening to Payal, who will create the stage, I would say. And after Payal and the conversation with the change makers, there will be a session for questions and answers. So please keep your questions, sharp questions and answers for after the panel discussion. And I'm sure you will enjoy it. And Payal, I would like to invite you. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So thank you, everyone. And can I just say a big congratulations for, building this impressive legacy. And, more importantly, that you're now got the job to maintain and even reinvent it for decades, I hope, to come, right? So, before I get started, of course, what I'm going to do is trying to give some sort of nuanced approaches to digital cultures, which is upon which you're going to build programs and services for outreach. But just want to ask you a few questions, just to see how you all are in this room. For example, how many here, just raise your hand or make a noise, how many here actually would accept a friend request from a total stranger? Anyone? A total stranger. Come on. Interesting, very open-minded. Okay, all right, a few. All right. What about, how many of you would share your passwords with a partner? Or do share your passwords? Okay. With a friend? No. It better be a very good friend with benefits. Okay. Or, okay. And how many of you would actually spend more than an hour creating a piece of content, like just one post, more than an hour? Okay, so you guys will keep your job. Okay, good. This is please take note, right? All right, what about 4 hours? No? Okay, there's a limit, right? We are in the Netherlands after all. Okay, so, all right. No, thank you. So, let's get started. Oh, there you are. You just relocated. I was like gesturing to. They're like, "What are you doing?" There you go. She moves very easily, actually. So, all right. So I'm the author of The Next Billion Users, and I'm a digital anthropologist. So that's just a fancy way of saying that I study how people, particularly young people, make sense of digital media in their everyday lives, and how they perceive, how they make sense of it, how they, integrate it into their everyday lives, right? And I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and that's basically, I'm from India, so I started in low-income communities in India, and then I moved to Brazil, and I've been doing a lot of comparative work in Namibia and Nigeria right now. So these are my contexts, but obviously I build on other kinds of work of similar nature, right? And I've been working with a number of public and private sector organizations, the usual tech companies, because it just so happens that when I came up with the book, I was gifted with search engine optimization because every tech company set up their next billion user lab. So Google has been my friend, right? I mean, literally and figuratively, actually. So they also have a next billion users lab. Now, why is everybody, and it's not just the tech companies. I've had farmers companies approach me, solar panel companies, seed companies, journalists. Basically, it's across board. It's become intersectoral because everybody is eager to understand who are these next billion users, what do they want, and how do we best optimize this to create global well-being? Well, in the case of corporations, they just want more profit. But that's one part. But basically, the next billion users are these young people who are coming online for the first time, and often they are mainly on their mobile phones. They don't have multi-devices. They often share passwords. They friend strangers. 2/3 of their friends are strangers because they're looking for global social capital. They are basically extremely optimistic about the potential of digital media. Right? And they truly bring the social in social media. So, while in the 70s, people were like, well, any kind of digital media, the kumbaya, and then, we'll bring the community together and create a global village. And now we become very cynical about it. Now basically you have headlines like, oh my God, social media is going to kill democracy. And yet, this is one of the few spaces, the aid agencies, where you are optimistic in a sea of pessimism. And you must understand that, right? Because even my own students feel like, oh my God, the world is coming to an end. This is horrifying, getting online. I feel violated. So, as you go into, it's very crippling to have that kind of pessimism bias, that it's oppressive, that you're being watched, you're being tracked, and you have media constantly reminding you that you're victims of a sort of a digital sphere that you can't escape. You're trapped in an echo chamber, You are in a constant surveillance machine, like a digital prison, so to speak. And then you speak to organizations and aid agencies and development sector, and they're like, oh my God, digital media is going to change the world, and we are going to be on top of it. So how do we mediate these two worlds, right? And this is really important to understand. So one is, of course, legacies are important. Doing good is something that is a mantra, right, amongst aid agencies. But let's start with shedding some sort of legacy thinking. Like, there's 2 classic things which I'm always surprised still, circulates in policy, which is the Maslow pyramid and the population bomb. How many of you have heard of these 2, right? Okay. And how many of you have actually heard people, like, it could be partners, could be, policymakers, government officials in different parts who actually subscribe to these views? That's very few. That's optimistic. That's good to know. So, by the way, anyone behind this poll, please understand, I see you through it, okay? So, so it's not that I'm trying to avoid you. So, anyway. But yeah, that's really good. But in general, I've been engaging for 2 decades with these organizations, and they do subscribe. In fact, I was at COP26 in Scotland, and the population bomb was still a legitimate theory that kept circulating. And what does that mean for those who are not, who need a sort of refresher course from school? Is basically the Maslow pyramid is about how, there's a us and the them, right? The us are, we are the well-off, we are the privileged, and of course we are all about self-actualization and nurturing our innermost, optimizing ourselves, be the best me. I mean, okay, I know I'm quoting a TV series, but all right. So anyone know where that line is from? Fargo. No? Okay, all right. Be the best me? All right, never mind. All right, it's a COVID. I mean, come on, you rewatch stuff, right? So anyway, but basically the Maslow pyramid is that, you know, for those people, which is pretty much most of the world who are outside of the West, they need to go through a pyramid. They need to satisfy their physiological needs, you know, and all these different belonging, safety, and only the transcendence, the self-actualization comes in the end. Whereas actually it's the reverse, because people in very desperate situations who have lost everything, right, or who are really struggling, they need to humanize themselves. I mean, picture an auto rickshaw driver driving for 16 hours, 14 hours, sleeping in the auto, right? I mean, he is disposable. And so he needs to remind himself he is human. So it is, digital media has enabled him. It could be sharing a joke. It could be, you know, sending a sort of a lovely saying, a prayer, you know, or something on the everyday level, connecting with people to recognize and reinforce that they have dignity and they have a voice, right? And this is something really, really important. So we have to turn the pyramid on its head. And we have massive evidence. These are old theories which have been around for decades, right? But despite evidence, as we know today, that having all the evidence does not shelve a theory and say this is not relevant. If people perceive it to be relevant, it is relevant. So I have to admit, as an academic, we have very little impact because we can do all the best research and say, see, we are done debating this, and then the world can continue keeping it around, right? And then you have the population bomb, which really poses and has a sort of moral panic that, oh my God, these people in the global south are breeding like rabbits, right? A very neo-colonial kind of thinking is like, we need to contain them, whereas it's okay, how can we get the Swedish to have more babies, for God's sake, right? So it's like, you know, it's like the two different ends. It's like Swedes, good, the rest, bad, right? So, and this notion that the burden of a population from the rest is going to bring down the planet is actually a very false sort of dichotomy, as you know, including climate crisis. Because much of the consumption takes place in the West, also in terms of, you know, the energies, the momentum, the diversity. Much innovation is happening in the global South, and we just need to look and pay heed to it, right? So, so look, we need to shift. I mean, there's a lot of talk about doing good. I mean, anyone in this business of social change pretty much is like, I'm into the business of doing good, right? We need to kind of shed that because doing good has a toxic legacy. I mean, think about it. Be a good wife, okay? Be a good slave. Be a good citizen. Often it has connotations of how do I control you with templates that are very patriarchal or very controlling, very authoritarian. So the legacy of good is pretty damn bad, all right? So we need to move away from doing good, which means that as if we have all the answers and the values that need to be spread to all of humanity. I mean, in fact, look at the movement of AI for good. It's literally an area called AI for good. And it's not surprising that it's all venture capital funding from Silicon Valley out to capture markets in the name of doing good. So in fact, it often masquerades as something altruistic when it's not. So what I think is more important is we need to do it right. And how do you do it right is by what I come up with is ABCDE principle, and which is understanding where you're functioning, architectures, behaviors, collectives, designs, and e-content. And let me go through this, right? The first is the architects. So architectures are basically, if I want to understand how people are, building digital cultures, if young people are nurturing themselves and others, I need to understand the context within which they're operating. And we can't be naive about it. Obviously, we want to best capitalize on these platforms. So, we have to understand the politics of the game right now, which is complicated. We are basically in a sort of hyper monopoly, right? So you have a few suspects that control most of the digital space. I mean, in fact, Facebook is, Meta rather, is creating underwater cables for Africa to capture the African continent. In fact, The Economist celebrates it as who gets to carve Africa and gets to take pieces of Africa. I mean, completely tone deaf, which is surprising for a mainstream, magazine, right? So there's a lot of enthusiasm of how Facebook not only is just a digital platform, it is the essential infrastructure where services and projects, everything, including government, gets built upon. That means they have an overseeing eye far more than governments. So they are not elected, they are the ones. They are the air you breathe, right? That is pretty damn dangerous. But, so we have to also pay, cognizance to that. And we also have to understand that there are there is optimism, like Australia, where Facebook tried, Meta, I have to get used to that, right? Meta tried to, say, okay, Australia said, well, you are a publishing platform, we're going to treat you this way. And they're like, okay, we're going to, close the tap. We're going to get out of Australia because we can. And it created huge public uproar saying you can't do that because essential public services were built on it. In fact, Facebook is the internet for most of the global south. And governments have built essential infrastructure. So they have so much actually power over people. So there is that dynamic and there is a pushback, but we need to understand that space that is operating in, right? The other aspect is a sort of ecosystem because, see, even though there's a lot of novelty about the next billion users that have come online because they basically managed to come online because of extraordinarily cheap data plans and mobile phones. For example, the pioneering Jio, which is from India, from Reliance Industries, which made data from one of the most expensive to the cheapest in the world. And you're talking about a few cents GB versus here you're paying like 7-8 euros or in the US $15, right? So that has radically allowed for the democratization of of the internet. But that also comes with sort of like allies of a particular nature, which is defying net neutrality, right? Which is saying that, okay, I'm going to collaborate like a mafiadom, right? That I'm going to collaborate with this organization, and we are going to become the internet, which is what Jio is doing. They partner with Disney, they partner with Facebook, and people think that's the internet, right? And so what's happening is you're part of an ecosystem that you're trapped in thinking that's the internet. So these are spaces. So if we are not aware of what we are operating within, we will not get very far, right? The second part is, the next one is about behaviors. We have to understand also that, people like this us and them trope also says that, well, poor people will obviously, if given this precious opportunity to express themselves through digital media, they will do the good things, right? They will educate themselves. They will, uplift themselves and get jobs. They will hunt for jobs. They'll do all the right things. Children will teach themselves English and computers and scapegoat and leapfrog into, a higher income bracket, right? So there's all that optimism, but the reality is that they're like children like anywhere else. Try expecting that from your teenagers to do only homework, right? That's not going to happen. So, why do we have these sort of differences of expectation? In fact, much of what they do is driven by leisure, but it's not really peripheral because that creates a lot of moral panic. Oh my God, they are wasting away precious resources, right? That's a sort of discourse. But actually, leisure is a critical space within which people, if you think about historically the connotation of leisure, we've actually had a war to fight for the right to a weekend. Because if you look at the legacy of leisure, it's all about a space which is not structured for any utility-driven purpose, which allows you to think, to sort of contemplate, and to purposefully act in ways that can really enhance your well-being, right? So it is, this unstructured time is so essential for enhancing our humanism. And that's really, really important. And you will see that they're not waiting around for us to give lectures, they are just doing it. So this is an example. For example, he's a village influencer in India, Neil Renaud. And he actually basically plays with the environment, and he builds his own outfits and with the nature around, and he has more followers than the top fashion designers in the world. So it's really very interesting. And also that platform has allowed him to speak about, rurality versus urbanism, bring in the rural communities, open up a dialogue of the sort of very, stereotypical notions of the backward rurality versus the modern urbanism. And so that has allowed for much more nuanced conversations. So these are just pathways, right? Or this is a visual from some of my field work in the slums of India, where we were looking for actually privacy. How do young people think about privacy and visibility using digital media? And one of the dominant tropes was that if you want to understand young people's privacy, you need to look at their romance behaviors. And this was reinforced in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Brazil. Across board, young people are the most motivated to find love. I mean, think about it. You're a teenager. Your whole identity is based on who will love me. Am I special? I want to have my first kiss, my first romance. And if you're in the global south, you're inundated with, majority of them will have an arranged marriage. But then they're fed on this crazy Bollywood, Nollywood, Tollywood stuff about the sunset and the birds kissing. And then, you fall in love and you run away from home and, all that stuff, right? And so you have this cognitive dissonance of like hyper romance and, dancing around in Switzerland in your bikini. And then you have to have an arranged marriage with somebody who you barely know. And so they want to feel like they have experience before they have an arranged marriage. So many of them have girlfriends and boyfriends and, partners that they can say, oh, I'm very experienced, even if they've never met them, ever. And so the way they woo them is they create these sort of collages. And they get very global, right? Like, as you can see, Justin Bieber was very useful for this guy serenading, a girl on Facebook, right? And there's so much of this content. And what does this teach you? They learn how to use digital media. They learn how to create engaging posts. They use Google Translate to talk to Brazilian girls because they're easier and they'll accept them than Indian girls who are really difficult, So it's like they're learning all these skills by romance, right? And they get privacy because they have very, very interfering, families. Interpersonal surveillance is hyper and much more of a concern than, say, state surveillance or corporate surveillance, right? And then I just want you to check this video out. Now this, just a context, is how many of you know about the rural shuffle dance in China? Anyone? So this was during the pandemic. I mean, these guys lost a lot of their income. The husband went into deep depression. So the wife said, look, I know how to cheer you up. Let's come up with some routine to break the monotony of our life. Let's invent a dance. So they were doing this and they were just filming it and putting it up online. They got millions of followers. And the Chinese government were like, oh my God, great. So let's double down on them. And they became media stars. And they actually now have a genre called rural shuffle dance. So, and this also gave them a platform to speak about the plight that, farmers are facing in China. And this also resonated across different countries in the global south that, part of the hashtag politic, which also benefited, and people said, well, let's imitate that and let's, scale these events. So this is just an example. So maybe you'll try that at your next party, and say, don't you know? Aren't you with it? All right. So, all right, and hope you remember some of these steps, yeah? So we are planning to test you. This is part of she hasn't yet announced that, but we're going to be doing a sort of dance competition. Okay, I hope you're all prepared for it. So, all right, and the collectors, basically, as we know that much can be, much can happen, including hashtag politics, to really push and amplify, particularly for those in the margins, right? And that's the beauty of the digital, media cultures, but also, of course, it can have the opposite repercussions. You can have fringe groups of the right and left, of two extremes, hate speech, as well as, proactive speech. So, you're facing both poles in equal intensity. That's the truth of it. Now, what's really interesting is that it creates a very high-risk culture. And so this is an example. I was, some years ago, actually, I was giving a keynote at the Rnw Association, and I was kind of surprised to be invited for it because, I'd never heard of them. So that was not, I had a Wikipedia Rnw, and then it said they were terrorists and they were activists. I was like, should I say yes to a terrorist/activist group? I don't know, But I said yes, of course, because I'm like, why not, It'll become a good story. But no, I mean, they basically are a group that has been fighting for their, their identity and their social identity in Ethiopia. Abiy Ahmed became the first Oromo prime minister or president, shall we say, in Ethiopia. But of course, things have taken a very dark turn in the last few years, unfortunately. But at the time when I was there, these people were very, very enthusiastic. And what he was doing was live streaming my talk. And I had the largest audience in my entire career. I had 70,000 people watching. And I was like, how is this happening? I'm not even I don't know shit about this, right? And how is this happening? And this is the power. They were like, this is how we remind them that we are not, we're not disappearing. We may be asylum seekers in Europe and the US, but we're very much here, and we're going to shape the Ethiopian politics for decades to come. We're not disappearing. And that's the power of collectives, right? Farmers protest in India, you see the same thing. Why are they holding these posters in English? Because they understand that this is going to be mediated to a global audience so they can build empathy, especially because national spaces are going to curtail it, right? And we see this across board, is who your audience is often leapfrogging from your national or municipal or even like a local base. And that is very essential to have small voices become big. And second last is the design values, right? So we can't just operate in a vacuum. You have to recognize that the platforms or your programs have values. You need to make transparent. And there's a lot of sort of values in design and design thinking, but it's become too much of a buzz term. And I think it really helps to first say, what do I hold dear? Because people are like, well, I shouldn't impose my values. Well, no, everybody has values. You need to map it down, be transparent, say, what is it that I'm willing to fight for? And then go for it, right? And of course, as you operationalize it, partner with people who actually have experience. I mean, I've been getting the same question weirdly from even different tech companies. I mean, I was literally talking to a bunch of tech people, and they're like, do we have a right? I mean, I can't mention names, but you can guess all the usual tech suspects. And across board, I literally got this question, do we have the right to be in these contexts? I'm like, you are there. I mean, in fact, it's your biggest market. I mean, it is really disturbing when you ask me that question, right? And they're like, well, can we impose our values? And, we wish if San Francisco would just be a country and we could just be left alone and we have no right to move across board. So, this sort of thinking is ridiculous because actually you are there, you have the platform, you have the power, recognize that, but also recognize it's also got a responsibility. And the last part is about e-content, right? Now, e-content is about the nature of the content that's coming out of it. And this is basically examples of, the ingenuity of user-based content, which circumvents, surveillance machines. So it's really hard. Like in China, for example, you can come up with these visuals, and it's not quite sure whether you are agreeing with the government. It's literally like, yeah, give me high five, I'm really with your program, or does it sound like satire? And actually, it's brilliant because the Chinese protesters have mastered the art of making it into this thin line of, well, maybe they are really enthusiastic about the state, right? I mean, why not? Or that they're just poking fun of the state. And I think that's where the secret is, to look at the nature of engagements and the sophistication of communication that is, that is emerging from, these different countries. I mean, look, let's just face the fact that liberal democracies are something like less than 5% of the world's population. We mainly reside in a spectrum of paternalistic to hyper-authoritarianness, right? So that's not the idea of should we engage is not a question. We are, if you want to be global, which we have to, because the most important problems we face today, whether it's the climate crisis, the health crisis, or financial reform, name it, right? Or the platforms themselves, which are intrinsically global in nature, we need to think as a global public, right? So just to wrap up, there are 5 ways of changing our socials. We keep talking about social medias, but we need to also think about changing our socials, which is about, leisure, pleasure, joy, play, our pathways to sustainable development, right? And radical disruption needs to be shelved for some sort of humble disturbances, because things are not just going to blow up. If you think about the protest culture from centuries, it has happened softly and quietly until the change happens at the top level before they even know it. That's how things happen, right? So what you do here is actually humble and soft, but it is equally powerful. Blowing up a system just actually disrupts and creates chaos. And the us versus them needs to be shifted as us as them, right? We are that. I mean, if we have to think in those terms that if I was in their context, I would probably behave and make choices like them, which is a fact, because we are based on these architectural constraints. And diversity as a challenge, of course, as you know, is actually an opportunity, because it allows for, a multiplicity of expression, of choice, which we really need, because we are really getting scarce on choice. And there's a pushback on that, right? And besides, it's so boring to be uniform. I mean, right? So, and the last, of course, is this notion of altruism mindset needs to be shelved, because we're not doing good. In fact, it is to your interest that there's global well-being, because if there's global well-being, you will be in a good place, right? And if with that mindset, we need to proceed. And I will just stop here. I look forward to listening to the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Payal, for this very engaging speech. And for our audience, if you have questions or comments, or you would like to discuss more with Payal, there are 2 chances: the Q&A in a bit, and later during the drinks. So you might hear me coughing from time to time, and it's not COVID. I'm Palestinian. I live in Jerusalem. And being in prisons is an allergy I have, it seems. So it might be that. No, but it's maybe from traveling. So excuse me in advance. So I joined Rnw Media in 2013. And when I joined, the organization was transitioning from a broadcaster to an NGO. I remember that I was asked to focus on a pilot project focusing on Yemen and engaging young Yemenis back then. I was directed and asked to focus on building a project that focuses on digital media, on social media. I remember I was very critical then. Like, how can we engage young people in Yemen by engaging with them online, by reaching out to young people online? Is this even possible? And the organization was saying, like, we're an NGO, so we want to create social change. We want to create impact. So I came with my critical mind thinking, like, okay, I'm not sure this would work, which is something that you might be wondering, or you wondered at some point, and thought, okay, let's try this out. So, Yemen, there's very limited internet access in Yemen, and sometimes hardly electricity. So taking this crazy idea and trying to work it out, experience showed me that actually we can reach the hearts and minds of young people using digital spaces, which you might think is crazy enough, but I learned that it is possible and there is a way to indeed achieve social change. I won't spoil it for you, although I can, because I have a lot to say about this experience. But we learned a lot throughout this journey, and I remember that RNW Media chose the most restrictive settings to test the different digital approaches. And we learned about some things that they work and some they don't. So we took these learnings over time, back then when I was with the organization, and continued to roll out different projects in the countries. So today we will answer some of the questions that I had back then, starting in Yemen. We hope to speak to the doubts that you might have about implementing digital media projects and using digital platforms and digital media for social change. I won't take more time from our change makers. I want to take this chance to welcome them, who took the hassle of traveling amid the chaos of Schiphol and applying for visas and everything. Welcome, please, warm clap to our change makers who are joining us now. So, as Jacqueline mentioned, Sandy is joining us from Egypt, Spajion from Burundi, and Lucy from Lebanon. Maybe let's first quickly start with an introduction about yourselves and the work you do in the region.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Very weird. It was sunny yesterday in Lebanon. It's sunny the whole time. So my name is Lucie Doumanian. I'm Armenian Lebanese. I come all the way from SMEX, Beirut. We are a digital rights organization. We focus on digital rights in the MENA, and that includes a lot of things, obviously. We go from policy advocacy, pushing our governments to actually create, develop, draft laws and policies on digital rights, all our work, privacy, everything online. And then we do a lot on digital security and digital resilience, especially that, as you know, the MENA is quite restrictive in terms of what we can say and what we cannot say, freedom of expression, etc. So our work also includes a lot of focus on digital safety for young people, LGBTQ, CSOs, CBOs, etc., working in the region.
Thank you, Lucy.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to meet everyone here, because there was a risk for me to go back, whereas I was already in front of the door yesterday, talking about Schiphol issues. So thank you. I'm Spajongao. I'm from Burundi, working with our organization Yaga, that is a media platform organization working on digital issues, giving young people voice to talk about topics that matter for them. It began in 2015 with the RNW. From our birth, it was in 2015. We were with RNW. How do we call midwife? We call a midwife these wives that help women to give birth. So RNW is the midwife for Yaga, and we have been working on these digital issues for young people. But today we have more than 10 other partner organizations, international organizations, embassies, local organizations, individuals working with Yaga to make it happen, to make young people participate to always life, daily life, to contribute and peace building, many issues. Maybe I will keep giving many informations about Yaga. Thank you.
Thank you, Spajan. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy Abdelmesih. I am the project manager for Love Matters Arabic. I joined RNW Media in late 2015. And I joined with two of my colleagues from Egypt as the first local team in Egypt to run the Love Matters Arabic project. And 8 years later, here I am. Now we're the biggest digital community in Egypt and the MENA region speaking about SRHR for Arabic-speaking youth. we're also very unique with our pleasure positive approach that we have learned from RNW Media. We try to provide young people who speak Arabic with information and knowledge about sexual and reproductive health and rights through digital media. So we're existent on online on our website, on our social media platforms, and we try to always explore new places to reach more young people with our knowledge and information. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Thank you very much, Sandy, Sfajion, and Lucy. We'll get to hear more about the exciting things that you just mentioned. Maybe starting with you, Sfajion. As Sfajion mentioned, the platform Yaga focuses on so many issues. It's about young people and the issues they care about and want to address. So you don't have one focus. You don't have one theme that you focus on. And we usually in the NGO sector, when we look at programs and the way they're designed, they're focusing on one theme. And usually this one program or one project takes years to implement with the idea that change takes time. At Yaga, we saw successes of working on many different spectrum of topics. At the same time, a lot of stories that show impact, show change in society. How is this possible? How does a media platform that has so many topics that you address succeed in achieving social change? And if you can share an example, it would be very nice.
Thank you. If I can say that we are working with just one thing, finally it's not a thing. Usually it's not a thing. I could say is a young population. That is the one thing we are working with. And talking about young people is a large word. It's a large word because a young man like me, like a young woman like me, like everybody here, they have many ambitions. They have many talents. They have many objectives they want to achieve in their lives. So, as we are working with young people, we give them the space, the skills, the information that can help them unleash this potential. They have so much potential, and they want to invest the potential in the life, to invest it for change, to changing the environment, changing politics, changing norms, social norms, changing everything. They want to reinvent everything. So we give young people this space to do it. And we have chosen to do it digitally, to give them these digital platforms so that they can publish their stories, their ambitions, the stories of their what they think, what are their opinions about everything. And this everything is like policies about politics, about SRHR, about economic inclusion, about women and men, about young ladies and young boys. They want to contribute to everything. And achieving change takes a long time, of course, but there are many ways to do so that you can potentialize this change to occur in like few times, because we have, for example, we have been running campaigns. That is one of our expertises. A campaign on periodic pads. This is an SRHR issue, periodic pads. You know, this piece of what? These pieces that young ladies are using during menstruations every month. Yeah. So in Burundi, it's difficult to access these periodic pads because they are very expensive. No, it's not all the young ladies that can afford the price of periodic pads. So we heard about a story of a young lady that was using the tree leaves during her periods, and then it was a really touching story how can a young lady from the rural zone who is using tree leaves to protect herself, that is not an acceptable thing in a human community. So then we decided to run a campaign asking for the taxation of these periodic pads, asking to authorities to stop taxing these pads so that young ladies can access them. So we gave these young ladies the space to express. They write some quotes asking for them to reduce the prices. They write their stories, testimonies of what they are living, the pain they are having during the periods, and we producing some videos. We are engaging our technicians to realize videos about this issue, and there were these young ladies and boys who were like contributing to the content, so bringing to contribution their stories. And then I remember one day there was another media that was calling in the Ministry of Gender and other issues, social issues, and they said, we have heard about this campaign, but we don't know what to do. That was a satisfaction for us, to declaring that they have heard about the issue we are raising. So we continue working, producing content, talking about the issue, and like 2 months after, they declared during a workshop like this, there was an officer from the ministry that declared that they have set a commission that is working on a policy of the taxation of these periodic pads, and we were really happy.
Of course, congratulations.
And this is thank you so much. Thank you so much. This is an example of change that can be boosted through the use of these digital issues. We have run many campaigns about periodic pads, about the use of drugs in young people, about economic inclusion for young people, exposing just young people who are beginning their businesses from nothing, and they are making it. We expose them, and then they get like many doors of opportunities that are open for them. So making change, it really takes time. It really takes time, but you can also make things easy using these digital platforms to connect people with issues, with ways of doing, and everything.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Spajion. Actually, Spajion has many other wonderful examples. He really brightened my day when I first called him to hear the examples of how Yaga is engaging young people. So find him during drinks and hear about other exciting stories. So you mentioned, Spajion, that while working on campaigns, you mentioned that you worked with partners, and also in your introduction you said that you have more than 10 partners. Yep. And you mentioned how digital media accelerate social change. Yeah. How do you work together with partners? What do you bring together? And if you can share an example to inspire our audience.
Yeah, I begin by the example before explaining how we do it. Today, we are supporting the Netherlands Embassy in Burundi to implement their communication strategy. We have trained them using these digital platforms to communicate, because you know these issues of diplomacy, they don't want to communicate. Maybe they find that it's really risky to communicate, especially in countries where expression is not really sure. So we have been doing training to them, giving them training on communicating with Facebook, with Twitter, and Instagram, and everything. So after this, they demanded us to help them elaborate a communication strategy. We did it. And today they have engaged us as a communication agency so that we can help them implement this communication strategy. That is just an example of the ICANN embassy. And so for all the partners, we are just helping them to reinvent the ways of doing, because there are many classic ways of doing in NGOs. They are like for sensitization, they are going to the ground, the field, calling people to come and hear the message we have to give to you. There may be 100 people that can come. You give your message and you go back. You don't know if they are going to change. You don't know if they have captured the message. But if you do it digitally, you will reach millions of people. And then you have ways to track the change, to measure the change. So this is what we are providing to this organization with which we are doing this. Media organizations, organizations that are working in peace building, organizations that are working on these VBGs issues, everything. They are coming to us just to ask, please show us how we can invest this expertise in making things happen. So that is what we are doing with them. But also, they are also contributing on our work, giving us their experience, giving us with the data. For example, data. They have some datas, and they contribute on our work, because we also need information on what is ongoing on ground, because we are virtual, digital. So it's an issue of complementarity. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Spajion. And this is not working, but I think everyone can hear me. Oh, now it's working. Thank you. Thank you, Spajion. It's very good that you mentioned data, and this helps us move to our next speaker, which is Sandy. Sandy at Love Matters Arabic, you have been engaging with millions of young women, although you work on SRHR and you have so many sensitive topics that the first thing that comes to mind that, okay, if there's a sensitive topic, it's unlikely that you'll find young women coming to discuss it in a conservative setting. So it's difficult to imagine how this is possible. How did you manage to attract this many of young women from Egypt and the Arab world to engage with your content? And if you can also share with us some stories.
This is a very interesting question. We've been trying out many strategies in order to increase the engagement of our audience, especially women, because being online and speaking publicly about sensitive topics could come with a lot of prices, like being subject to cyberbullying, being subject to cyber harassment, unwanted and unsolicited friend requests, and being chased out everywhere in the comments and inbox. So it takes a lot of effort to encourage women to engage safely online, especially with our content. And we do this with following many strategies. One of them is that we always try to update our content strategy by being informed with data, as you have been saying, Spajion. So we always read the data of which kinds of topics are read most on our platforms, even though it's not matching with what's happening in public, in the comments section. So for instance, there is an assumption always that you cannot speak about or like put content about masturbation online because people would feel like this is so inappropriate, and you're encouraging people to do behaviors that are prohibited by religion and that does not fit our culture. But surprisingly, the pieces about masturbation are always on the top visited pages on our website, and we receive around 18 million page views per year on our website. So there is a huge chunk of the visits and the people who follow our platforms. This is what they are looking for. although what's been spread publicly is that this kind of topics are not needed because obviously all Egyptians do not masturbate, for your information. All Egyptians don't need to learn about sex because eventually they will do it after they get married, so no need to know about STIs or safe sex because how come they will get it if they wait to marriage? So we get always surprised with this comparison between what the data says and what's happening actually online. And also we invest a lot in online moderation, which gives us the edge of being non-judgmental and an online safe space for everyone to engage freely with our content without being afraid of the cyberbullying and harassment and all that. And we have a dedicated team of experts who provide a lot of value doing this online moderation. They don't only answer the questions of the young people that come as an interaction with our content, but they also ensure that everyone has enough space to express themselves, even if they don't agree with what we're sharing, but they feel that there is a space for them to be heard and acknowledged. And have like this chance to have a discussion in front of everyone about why we hold this position and why you're holding this position and try to get somewhere with it. So this kind of interactions prove to everyone online that we're here to listen and we're not imposing our own understanding of issues and our own foreign agenda on them. But we're here to analyze and discuss and have an open conversation about the topics that obviously they care to know about. So this is how we're trying to reach more people and show them that you're not putting yourself at risk when you engage with our content. Something else that we invest a lot of time in doing is that we try to explore new spaces online to engage with young women in a way that makes them more comfortable. Like, for example, we always notice that they engage more wherever it could be anonymous, but eventually it will be public. How? In the interactive stories, for example, on Instagram and Facebook, when you put on your story a sticker with a poll or a Q&A, then you can share answers and input that would eventually be public with everyone, but nobody knows who written that. So they engage more and more, and they engage in the inbox, they engage when we open online surveys to collect input and data about what concerns them, and then we take this and create content with it, and they see that they are heard, they see that what they think about is actually on our agenda. So all of this help us a lot in expanding our audience generally, and especially with women and vulnerable groups. And I remember another example, like last year, we created this visual about unpaid care work, and people like were fascinated that finally there is a name, there is a term to call what they have been doing and what they have been suffering with all these years. Although we didn't coin the term, I mean, it has been there all the time. But our audience, it was new to them to know that there is this terminology and this has a name and this is not okay. And how our female audience interacted with the content was fascinating. Although the male followers were like, how come you're saying this? Do you want us to pay our wives to cook for us or to clean the house? Well, I can't reply very honest now because we're gonna shut down, but kinda, yeah. So this is how we're trying to basically expand our the engagement of our audience, especially women.
Thank you, Sandy. And what I have noticed as an Arabic woman myself is that the language you use to engage with women is very sensitive. You address both women and men. And this is this simple thing, because our language is masculine in its nature, like it's masculine dominant. These very simple steps that might sound simple take so much efforts to try to amend the language to be more inclusive and speak to the women. This is not something we're used to as Arabic women online. So thank you for the great efforts you're doing at Love Matters Arabic. And there are other Love Matters platforms in different countries also serving young women and men on different topics related to SRHR. So Sandy, you mentioned the risk of shutting down, and working on SRHR in Egypt and in MENA has so many risks, and staying online takes so much effort without, not going through a risk of, the government shutting you down or conservative parties attacking you and so on. What motivates you as Sandy to keep on going on working on this project? Like, you started with Love Matters since its very beginning, since day one, and I'm sure it wasn't an easy journey, but yet we see you motivated, and you're now the head of Love Matters Arabic and leading a team of change makers in the country, inspiring many other women in the country and in the region. What motivates you to keep going?
Well, it's I guess it's very simple and very complicated at the same time, because every time I feel tired and exhausted and like, why am I doing this? I want to do a career shift. I want to just work in a company, just worrying about like my payroll and my, colleagues and getting my tasks done, and that's it. But every time I remember how, as a person growing up, I suffered to find information and knowledge about very basic questions and very basic information, and how I felt after I got the chance to know the scientific information and the correct information with no bias and no judgment, and how much difference this has made to how I see myself and my self-esteem, and how I engage with my society and my colleagues and my friends, and how much I feel much healthy, like with my mental health and with my emotions and how I perceive everything that's going on around me. I feel like I want this to happen for everyone else. And I know it might sound cliche, but it's very true, because I remember how growing up as an adolescent, I used to have like a very negative body image, and I would go online and try to search for answers like, am I okay? Am I normal? Am I growing up correctly? Is there something wrong with me? Also asking questions online about very normal behaviors that any child or any adolescent would feel or do, but the surrounding is always telling you that this is not okay, or this is prohibited, or this would make you a bad person, have made me really had like a struggle growing up. And every time, because I spend a lot of time working with Love Matters as a moderator, so for almost 4 years, I have been answering the questions of young people on the different platforms, and I've seen how much a very basic and simple information would make a huge change in someone's life. And you would think that this is just like something on top of your hand. Why would such a simple information make such a huge change in someone's life? But it actually does. And this is every time I remember this and I see the people around me still struggling with basic information and knowledge, I feel like it's not done. I need to keep going. It's just not an option for me.
Thank you for all the courage, Sandy. It's knowing. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the courage, your courage, and also your colleagues. Meeting many of you, it's always inspiring to hear the stories. And in many cases, many of you were trying to work undercover almost, like not, you don't want to be seen, you don't, so this work, although media feeds the ego of a person, like it fills you, like, okay, you're getting famous, you're getting a lot of fame, a lot of attention, but in the case of Love Matters, there are so many contributors, so many people doing this behind the scenes, and for a journalist, this is not easy. So yeah, salute to the work you're doing. So we mentioned risks, and we mentioned that, okay, staying online is not easy in the context of, you know, working on social change. Sandy, the work you're doing in MENA focuses on enhancing human rights by focusing on digital rights. Okay. So how does your work help change makers like Sandy and Spangione and many others who are who have a big mission and working hard on many sensitive issues in many cases?
Yeah, well, first, being called a change maker, now I just realized that, yeah, I was called a change maker so many times today that when you're doing the work, you forget the label, in full honesty. So it brings so much honor, but at the same time, so much pressure, I'm not gonna lie. So in terms of what any of my fellow change makers in the MENA actually is working and doing, I think what SMEX is trying to do on different aspects is first and foremost, and both have mentioned actually, like access to information. And is it the right information or the wrong information? So what we're trying to do is make sure that the policies, and this is actually what's bringing us with Masaruna, is we're trying to look at the policies that are available on the different platforms and look on whether or not they give the right access to information to the different groups that are trying to access them. So this is one, and yeah, I see you doing this. They absolutely don't. Like the algorithm and everything, the way you can report information is so wrong. And platforms are so focused on content moderation, especially in the MENA with, for example, what's happening in Palestine and everything. Like for them, it's about, yeah, let's shut down X topic and Y topic. How about you focus on what's important around misinformation and disinformation? Like, isn't that much more important, at least to the majority of the people who have literally moved their access to information online? Like in the MENA, at least, we do not talk about our sexual habits with our parents. Like it's definitely a no-go. What we do, we look on the internet for any type of information that we want. So that's one thing. And another thing, I'll give an example of a case we handled recently at SMEX. We had someone from the LGBTQ community come to our digital safety help desk saying that he was being, well, one, cyberbullied, two, they had pictures of him in certain, I don't know, like situations, let's say. So the work that we do, and he was part of another organization that was doing change on the LGBTQ, in the LGBTQ community in Lebanon. And the work that we try to do with him is first and foremost protect them. So Sandy, whether we see it or not, is under a lot of cybersecurity threat just because she worked in the context where she works in. If she was to work here in the Netherlands, she wouldn't be at 1% of like the risk wouldn't be 1% of what it is in Egypt or in Lebanon or anywhere else in the MENA. So what we try to focus on, and just to wrap this up, is keeping us as change makers, as people who are trying to do right and not just good, keeping us safe and creating this safe and accessible environment online for young people, for the different communities that need the online sphere.
Thank you, Sandy. Maybe
Lucy,
Lucy, sorry. Thank you, Lucy. Maybe elaborating a bit on this. Internet freedom is a human rights priority for the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. How does internet freedom reflect on the lives and the quality of lives of young people in MENA from your experience?
Now that's a big question, I would say. I did not expect that. I mean, I just ended with the fact how it's what we want to do and what we aim to achieve is a safe and accessible space for all the communities online. And I think that in itself is human rights. Being able to access the internet with the right information and internet shutdown is something else in the MENA. And I think you would know internet shutdown is also another thing, for example, other than that also goes within accessibility. So it's about covering as much as possible all the grounds that lead to being able to go online and look for information. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your answer. So we want to give the chance to our guests to interact and ask their questions as well and their impressions on this. But first I'd like to invite Payal also to join us in the panel and to be part of our Q&A session. And while Payal joins us, I want to refer to our guest, Pascal Grotehuis from the Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You're welcome. Thank you for joining us. The Dutch Ministry of Foreign Affairs is obviously our strategic partners. We'd like to hear a few words from you about what you just heard from our changemakers.
Yeah, well, thanks very much. Maybe to start with congratulating you on your new building, but more important on the 75 years of great work that you've been doing. So congratulations to you and the whole team. And also congratulations to all of you. I really loved your story. I'm still thinking about it. And I loved the inspiration and also the bravery of the three of you. And I had to laugh at my colleagues at the Burundi Ministry or the Burundi Embassy. And I think actually you have very good contact with our embassy in Egypt and you with our colleagues in Beirut. So maybe they should have a communication strategy as well. So thanks for being brutally honest, but I think it's very good. And I'm not that much of a diplomat. I can handle these things. So it's really good. I think you probably know that both youth and digital spaces are really important for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. We have a Youth at Heart strategy, and I think we spoke about it. The Youth Advisory Committee is in the Netherlands this week to advise the new minister on our new policy note. And what is also new is that we also had internet consultations to provide input for the new policy note, so we're really taking it seriously. So it's just great to listen to you and the work you're doing. I know SRHR is very close to my heart, as is gender equality. And I know it's difficult, and it's sometimes even difficult in the Netherlands, even though it's absolutely no comparison to the situation where you're working in. So keep up the great work. And yeah, push our embassies to do more, and push me also to do more. And again, congratulations to RNW for making this all possible, and also for being so innovative and putting youth and digital spaces and digital freedoms. It's about voices and choices and amplifying opportunities. So congratulations for doing a great job, and you for being the great persons you are. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Pascal. So going to our dear audience, this is the time for you to ask any question you have or share a reflection with our change makers, if any. So yeah, I'll have the mic and you can maybe make yourself visible. Yeah, Camille.
Hi everyone. Well, thank you all for, okay, I can see everyone like that. Well, thank you all for your talks, and it was so inspiring, and I'm really, really grateful to hear you now. I had a question regarding, well, basically we all know now that main digital platforms or digital space like Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, Tumblr, even OnlyFans, all these spaces that are supposed to be quite free are getting more and more closed and more censored, so it's getting more and more difficult for sex-positive content creators to actually publish on this platform. And I was wondering if you already had some ideas or strategies into exploring new type of platforms or new type of digital spaces, because it's something I'm quite curious about. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
I go. Okay.
Please, Spajian.
Thank you. Of course, this digital environment is still is still changing. There's still coming new ways, new platforms. Like yesterday it was Facebook. Today is TikTok. Midwhile there was IG. So as we are working with these digital platforms, we are called to adapt ourselves. Because today, for example, we are the first platforms to be followed in Burundi with Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But there is TikTok that is new, and we have already begun to work with TikTok. And always there are like new ways, new algorithms, new things, new content creation. There is a content that is adapted to Facebook and they cannot go with TikTok. So you have to innovate. even in creating like videos for TikTok. You know, TikTok, you create a video and you do not talk. There's music and the actor will act without speaking. Maybe, of course, there are some who speak. So you have to adapt yourself and keep always focus on the objectives you want to achieve. And you have to sit down and think, how can I achieve this objective in the environment of TikTok? How can I do it with the environment of Facebook? For example, in Burundi, many young people who are not speaking like French or English, they are engaged on Facebook. That is the big environment of the characteristic of that audience. It's on Facebook. But those who are like intellectual, those who have been doing their studies, they are on Twitter and the authorities as well. So if we have like a campaign for advocacy, we know that TikTok will come in front of the platforms we will be investing. And if we have like an activity of mobilization, of sensitization, we know that we will put Facebook in front. So that is how we do. We must know how to adapt ourselves to these realities, to the new algorithms that are coming. You know, at a given moment, Facebook has changed its algorithms, passing like the content that is scripts are not accepted, but you have to do it with videos. We have been obliged to change, producing more and more videos than text. That is what goes with Facebook. And the focus is our objectives, and they will know how to create new ways to do it in order to adapt.
Thank you, Spajian. You wanted to add something, Lucy?
Yeah, up until we find out what are the new platforms to share this kind of information, what we're trying to do at SMEX, and I'll give you an example of a certain Dr. Sandrine Atalla. So she's a gynecologist. I think you know her very well. So she literally talks, she has a TikTok account, and she shares all type of super good, obviously scientific, because she's a doctor, type of information on like sexual relationship, anything that's related to literally her field of work. And every single time, at least once a week, her account is shut down on TikTok. So SMEX, and it's something that we're happy about, but not so happy about. We are, partners in a way, or trusted partners of Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. So what happens is, in cases like this, the person themselves report to our digital safety help desk what is the case that they are facing. And because we're just a trusted partner, if we are to say to TikTok, listen, guys, Dr. Sandrine Atalla is like literally someone who's spreading the right type of information, please keep her content. And then her content is always kept. No matter how many times it's reported, they know that this is the one that we do. I'm not gonna lie, it's more reactive at the moment, but at the same time, through our digital safety help desk, we're trying to gather the data, like how many people are getting reported, what is the type of content that is being taken down, are they men, women, in Lebanon, Jordan, Tunisia, all across the MENA, and then we try to really understand if it's content takedown or moderation. We try to understand if it's because of the policy that is done by the platform, or is it because people really don't know and they just don't accept it and just report it, or if it's anywhere else. And this is how we start to look at things more proactively. So we use the data that we gather to do proactive policy work, but obviously like that takes time. And for now it's a bit reactive, but the plan is to make it more into policy advocacy and shifting the platforms for them to suit us, and not tell people, hey, you can't say this on this platform. Then what about freedom of expression?
Yeah, Payal, please.
Actually, you know, what we're talking about is really the tip of the iceberg. So much of these public platforms are active, but actually that's a fraction of what's actually happening, which is really encrypted platforms like WhatsApp. For example, India's election was won on WhatsApp. Now this is happening across the global south, including the West, right? Where we don't have the data to understand and predict, because much of what's happening is undocumented. We cannot actually have access to that data. And so, WhatsApp is become a platform actually, except that actually poses enormous challenges for people across board. I mean, it is a safe space in a literal sense, comparative so, but you can't tell whether you're a researcher or organization of whether it's 50 groups that are active or it's 50,000 people. That's a major difference. So you're often surprised by the results. And so I have actually a question for you, because I was, Sandy, you talked about, and I think you brought up a very important point about how the data actually says something that people don't actually speak in terms of the visibility of engagement. Because in the West, we don't have that massive discrepancy between what we believe and how we express, right? If I feel strongly about something, I will like it, or I will dislike it, or I will ignore it. But this discrepancy is clearly reflected in many countries where freedoms are much more limited, as all of you have said. But what happens when all these activities are happening in WhatsApp? Where do you get your, engagements? And you can't then be visible, right? So I'm curious, have you all engaged on WhatsApp, which I imagine, or similar, Telegram or whatnot, and how do you sort of capture that data for guidance for the future strategies, right?
Thank you, Payal. Actually, we have not used any texting app as a platform to interact with our audience like WhatsApp and Telegram, although many other projects and platforms use them to pass on mass content to a large number of people with one click. But as you have been saying, exactly, it's hard to capture the impact of what you're doing and to read the data behind the interaction that you're getting through this kind of platforms. So at the moment, we're not using those, but we're trying to fill in the gap that those fill, by texting directly with the experts and having long discussions and chats through the inboxes of other social media platforms. And also we have a discussion board forum, which is part of the website. It's a public forum where you can be anonymous or put your name, it's up to you, and start to open threads of questions and start to have a discussion with other users and with the experts on the platform. So we get surprised with also the number of inactive users who just go there to navigate other people's questions and answers, but they don't feel comfortable enough to open their own threads. And it still tells you a lot about the passive interaction and the passive engagement with the content. And you can see this also with the comparison between the numbers of reach and the number of active engagement that happens with likes and shares and comments. The number of likes and shares that you see is a very small fraction of the actual number of people who really liked and stopped and watched this picture for more than 3 seconds and opened the video for more than 1 minute, but they don't feel comfortable enough to press like or to share it with their network. So maybe in the future we can explore more innovative ways to use also texting apps in a way that's efficient and can tell us more about the interactions of our users. I'm not sure if my colleagues has
Yaga, have you used WhatsApp as a means
of course. We are using WhatsApp, and our ways of harvesting this information about the change we are doing through this is just being there. It's a qualitative way. Generally, people who are still interacting, they send us messages. Really, to do it quantitatively is somehow difficult, but qualitatively, it's doable. There are people who are still sending messages. You are in a group, a WhatsApp group. You can see that there is a member of your audience that has captured content that you have shared on the platforms. He brings in the groups. Even that is the way we use to work on topics that matter to women generally. Because in Burundi, women do not like expressing themselves publicly. That is a social issue. It's a social norm, social problems. They haven't yet managed to overcome this and openly express their issues, their problems, and to give their stories to people who they know they are going to publish them on Facebook and Twitter. So we go there. We hear, we listen to them in the group. They have their own group in which they discuss. We go there, we share the content, they discuss about it, and we approach them like friendly to ask if we can publish the stories on public in order to open the debate to all the other people. So I can say that qualitatively, it's difficult to collect all the data, but quantitatively, it's easy because they are interacting. They come to us and we go to them, sharing the information. This is even a development, a good step forward, because in the classic medias, the ordinary ones, you cannot even know how many people have heard about your emission. That is even the good side of these digital platforms. Because on the digital platforms, you can even know how many people have clicked on your content, how much time they have been reading or watching the video, how many people, how much they have been touched, because they can put a like, the others put a heart, others can share. That is different levels of how people express the way they have received the content. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Spajion. Maybe very briefly.
Yeah,
Lucy,
absolutely.
before
I have a
moving to the
completely
audience
different experience with WhatsApp, actually. In October 2019, our government decided to put taxes on WhatsApp and to make us pay. And this is how the revolution started in Lebanon. For those for those who don't know, you know, like we have the worst banking and economic situation in the country. No one cares, and then the government says, "I'm gonna tax WhatsApp $6. Everyone's on the street." This is what happened. And so whenever we knew about the government's decision, we automatically went to the policy of WhatsApp, and it literally says that no one can actually put taxes on using WhatsApp, which is supposed to be a free platform. So what we did, and because we were in a rush, we wrote a very quick, like our policy team researched and did a very quick brief on why this is not allowed, and then our tech team just checked if technologically can the ministry bill us and how it would look like, etc. And it's not feasible. Like it's just, I'm not gonna say the word. So what happened is we were waiting for our designer, and this is off the record, guys. We were waiting for our designer to finish the thing so we can put it in a blog post and with the picture and everything, make it all pretty and put it on the website. But we were running impatient, and we literally took it and started sharing it with family, friends, etc. Next thing you know, everyone's posting on Facebook how this is illegal. and we had not, if you check the time, it was literally less than an hour, but it was something. People were starting to talk about it. It was only shared via WhatsApp and Signal because we don't, and for us sharing news via WhatsApp is not okay. So just by sharing it there, that in itself, and it's not the only reason why there are uprisings in Lebanon. However, it started, and just for the record, it started with WhatsApp trying to bill us $6. So,
yeah, this shows us the power of social media, and what you mentioned, Payal. If people try to go, people can't go somewhere else. This is where young people would rather be to discuss and live. We live on social media platforms. So back to our audience, if there are any comments or burning questions before closing the panel, to enjoy the drinks which we heard popping. So So, okay.
Thank you. I agree with Camille. Thank you so much to the four of you. It was incredibly insightful to hear from you. And also, Sandy, I feel like your drive pushes me to my drive, and I feel inspired by your work. So thank you so much. I have a question for Payal, actually. When you discussed the digital infrastructure, I remember thinking about a couple of years ago when the news came out about YouTube's algorithm radicalizing young men and it kind of being ingrained within the system itself. And I remember a lot of the conversation in the digital world were like, of course, everybody knows about the algorithms. We all understand how they work. Everybody has an idea about it. And you know, like you said, it's kind of like it's a little bit of the air we breathe in. It's there, but I don't actually believe that we all have a clear understanding of it. So within your kind of ABCD, do you see a space also for media literacy and like the importance of it, or how exactly do we envision clarifying these things, explaining the media landscape that we operate in, and also how do we do it in a way that is easily accessible and that is maybe integrated even within the media platforms themselves? Like, I would love to hear your thoughts on media literacy.
Sure, it sounds like a course that I need to get.
So
all right,
no,
but
briefly,
I mean,
yeah,
I mean, thank you for the question. It's a very pertinent one. I mean, obviously, firstly, the positive aspect is the architectures within which we, exercise our digital cultures are very, very dynamic, and thanks partly to the EU laws actually and regulations that we are seeing on a literally on an everyday level. There is serious concerted action to, tame the tech oligarchs. And it's coming from the EU, and I'm really proud to be part of that, right? I mean, it's not coming from the US at all. So in fact, even though they've been trying to break down the tech, they can't do it because it's too entrenched. And so the EU has less stakes in that regard. And we are the audience, right? I mean, we are a huge consumer base. But that's not just the EU. It's happening across the global south, which has come up with data localization laws, which basically means that there's a sovereignty in the way in which data is controlled, saved, stored. So it's not a sort of a neo-colonial data extraction policies, but all of this regards means that as these platforms change, hopefully for the better, because we also know about shutdowns, which are happening, unfortunately, very frequently and rising, that digital literacies are required to be dynamic. And, you have to be on the go because policies change. But at least we know that what is it that people want to say and how can they say it, because certain things are rather relatively stable. Like, for example, the rise of encrypted platforms, the change is relatively stable. What's also unfortunately relatively stable is women dropping off the usage, the usage of digital media. In fact, since 2018, we've seen a decline in gender uptake of digital media, and that's the unfortunate aspect, partly due to all the comments that have just been brought up here. So I think there's a lot, but one thing is very, very clear is digital literacy is not the answer because it puts the onus on individuals that if only you have the right skills, you can navigate it. When actually it comes to us as regulators, as companies, as anyone with a platform to put the pressure to say, well, these are the values we hold dear. This has to be a critical public space. It's not a corporation. If you have become a monopoly, then you are no longer a company. Facebook is a platform which is a critical public utility, that means we can regulate it as such. And I think that's where we are at for regulation, and I think that's a very good thing, right? Because you can't have it all. You can't be a monopoly and not be expected to be treated as such, right? Yeah. So I think, and that I'll stop there, but that's it's an important relationship, but the onus is on governance and less on the fact that people have to take responsibility for their own actions, because that's just, transferring the blame, right?
Thank you, Payal and Lily, for the question. Any last burning question or comment to take from the audience? Yeah. Please.
I'll just keep it quick, but my question is directed towards Payal as well. So you began your talk by saying you make sense of what young people think about digital media. And I was wondering, as an anthropologist, if you have, in your own work and research, spoken to young people about what they feel about the internet itself, from the time when it was envisioned as an open space, free for expression and freedom, to a point where they've become the data for these profit-making tech giants. And also recent emerging research on the psychological changes that young people are also experiencing as attention spans, get shortened, and the broader biological changes that they might envision as well in the future. So I was just wondering if you have done any work or research on asking young people about what they think of digital media today.
Yes, thank you for the question. I mean, I've been asking that for 20 years at least. I mean, that's very much part of digital anthropology. You ask, but also you observe, right? Because what people say and what people do are also different. So you need to always triangulate, right? But I mean, of course, we've been asking. In fact, I have teams right now in Nigeria, about as they're working on universalizing healthcare, and they're doing it through digital apps, and particularly through influencers, because you have to inculturate banking, inculturate insurance policy practices. All these are inculturation processes which happen through that. I also have a team in India which is also looking at how low-income women workers, this is the organization FemLab, across different sectors are using digital media to gain power, because it's not through leisure, it's actually through labor, because that's one of the few areas where they're allowed to be online and to have a mobile phone because it's safe, they're bringing home. And through that little circumvention, they actually find themselves getting more respect at home, a little more control over their dignity, their money, and also higher status in terms of decision making, right? So, yeah, I mean, but also right now I have a project with a tech company that I can't mention, but it's on creativity, digital creativity across different countries in the global south. And I think that's very fascinating, because they are, firstly, it blows my mind how much time, I mean, at the beginning I asked all of you, how much time are you willing to put on a post? These people start by educating themselves on 7 to 20 different platforms to get the right kind of tool, like it's Canva and a little bit here and there. They have a curricula going on YouTube, and they are so sophisticated, and then they're producing this content so they can actually, gain a followers. It's all about the followers, so they can become a global citizen. And I mean, it's well worth keeping in mind that BBC did this survey where it said, asked a lot of youth across the world about whether they felt they were a global citizen. The EU was less than 30%, whereas much of the global south, it was 70 to 85%. And many of them will never travel outside their context. So, but I will stop here because I can see the nudge of alcohol at the horizon. So let us celebrate. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Payal. It's very interesting to listen to your words, of course.
I just want to invite you to the bubbles with alcohol, but also without alcohol. Really bring a toast to these great, courageous change makers. And Lucy, it's not increasing the pressure, it is acknowledging the work of you Spajan, of you, Sandy, and of you, Payal. I think, I am this inspired. I'm sure you are inspired as well. So let's use the drink and start asking even more questions and acknowledge their great work. So please take a glass and I'll bring a toast.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ruba. I forgot you.
Aww. No, you can't forget me. And maybe just a quick note, our change makers and partners are very open to working together, and their doors are open to join forces with your organizations to work on social change. So if you're interested, you can chat with them, or Jacqueline and the other leadership team members available with us today. Now, enjoy your toast.